In this module, we will learn the inputs, tools and techniques, and outputs of the define scope process. The define scope process involves the analysis of product requirements to determine and document all of the project work, and only the project work, required to complete the project. It is important to understand the differences among the project scope statement, the project charter, the project scope baseline, the scope management plan, and other documents. It is also important to know the difference between the define scope process and the create WBS process. There are 4 inputs to the define scope process. First, the scope management plan should describe how this process should be performed. This considers the uniqueness of the project environment to define who should be involved, which tools and techniques will be utilized, the way results should be documented, and the way in which the process may be iterated. The project charter is another input, as it includes a high-level statement of work for the project. While this isn't nearly as detailed as a project scope statement, it can provide a good high-level outline. The requirements documentation represents the most important input to this process. The project team must closely understand the various deliverable requirements and the relationship between them in order to properly determine the best approach to completing project work. Finally, organizational process assets may include templates and other lessons learned from past projects. The PMBOK guide defines 4 tools and techniques to the define scope process. Their collective goal is for the project team to evaluate the stakeholder needs and requirements, to determine a description of work that must be completed in order to meet these stakeholder expectations. While the stakeholders may contribute requirements at a technical level, they may not necessarily be closely involved with the definition of project scope. It is the project team's responsibility to understand what work will best help meet the stakeholder requirements. Product analysis includes techniques for turning product requirements and objectives into actual deliverables. These industry techniques can include performing a systems analysis to help understand how the various requirements must integrate with one another, as well as other analysis techniques like value analysis or functional analysis. Since there can be multiple methods of work to achieve the same end results, alternatives generation provides a brainstorming technique to determine different approaches to complete project work. For example, painting a room can be done with a brush, a roller, or a sprayer. It is up to the project team to determine which approach is most fitting for the project at hand. As used in the collect requirements process, facilitation brings together cross-functional key stakeholders to translate requirements into work. This can be useful when trade-offs need to be made between different functional areas, such as design and engineering. Multi-criteria decision analysis uses a decision matrix to evaluate and rank ideas with a systematic approach. Finally, expert judgment serves as a reminder that various levels of subject matter expertise will be required to complete this process. There are 2 outputs of the define scope process. The most important output is the project scope statement. The project scope statement is a narrative description of the project work that must be completed to meet project and product objectives. This should help to provide a common understanding of project work for all project stakeholders. This project document may also include major deliverables, project objectives, project assumptions and constraints, and project exclusions. This document provides more detail than the project charter and is a basis for making project decisions. There are a couple important attributes associated with this project document. The project scope statement should describe all of the work and only the work. And its purpose is to create a common understanding of work for all project stakeholders. This means that if two stakeholders ever have a misunderstanding as to what work should be performed, the scope statement is the best document for them to refer to. The defined scope process can also lead to project document updates. For example, as the scope becomes more clearly defined, the project team may have to make adjustments to the requirements documentation or traceability matrix. We have defined a few project documents in the integration and scope management knowledge areas, and will be defining many more in later modules. On the exam, it is important that you are able to differentiate between each one, which process they are an output of, and what their purpose is in the project management framework. The project charter is a project document intended to authorize the project, name the project manager, and define high-level project objectives. The scope management plan will define the project-specific approach for how the scope will be planned, monitored, and controlled. Requirements documentation will define the product, features, functionalities, and characteristics based on stakeholder expectations. And the project scope statement will provide a description of all of the project work and only the project work. Although there is only one output to this process, the project scope statement is a very important document in the project management framework. It will define all of the project work and only the project work for the common understanding of all project stakeholders. It will also serve as an input to nearly all other planning processes, including the final scope planning process, Create WBS.